Hi everyone, and welcome back to Real History. I am your host, History Professor Jared Frederick, and in this episode I'm pleased to be examining the first of what I will presume to be many trailers for Kevin Costner's forthcoming Western epic entitled Horizon. This is a two-part film. Its plot is yet fairly unknown, but part one comes out in June and part two comes out in August. And from the little bit of information I have been able to gather thus far, I've learned that the film is set during the American Civil War. This, of course, is a formula that is nothing new. There are many Westerns that overlap with the vast narrative of America's deadliest conflict, including Costner's previous Western, which is now well over 30 years old, and that is Dances with Wolves. And so I'm really interested to see him return to this time period and what he may have to offer that perhaps he didn't otherwise already cover. So the best way to do that, of course, is to take a look at this brand new trailer and offer some historical insights as we always try to do. So let's go ahead and take a look at the trailer for Horizon.
You and I are standing guard in one of the last great open spaces. These people think that if they're tough enough, smart enough, and mean enough, all this will be there someday.
Gorgeous scenery.
There's no army of this earth that's going to stop those wagons coming, little as they're wanted.
Oh, there he is, his big debut.
Get in there, quick. Quick. Come on.
It's all right. I'm gonna be with Dad.
No. No.
All I'm trying to do is get as many of us as I can, as far as I can.
I'd just like to have a drink tonight with someone who knows how to act.
You're not taking the full measure of this, Mary. I know the man I met was on his way to kill everyone in that house. He might as well have been walking up to get the mail for all it bothered him.
What you build, they will burn down.
You use that much this year?
Haven't had much need of it yet.
Oh boy.
Looks like we got ourselves a bad man right here.
All-star cast. So there's a lot that we can unpack in what we just saw, and I see a lot of themes and a lot of visuals that are reminiscent in previous explorations of the American West in cinema. So let's keep those in consideration too as we go ahead and dive into some of the historical details of what we just watched.
You and I are standing guard in one of the last great open spaces.
right out of the gate, I am reminded of one of the opening scenes in Dances with Wolves, where Kevin Costner's character, Lieutenant Dunbar, is told by this U.S. Army officer that we are on the verge of the frontier, and there are all of these grand statements made about seeing the West before it's gone. And so I'm very much reminded of that here, as this Army officer, played by Danny Houston, is looking out onto this sprawling compound.
These people think that if they're tough enough, smart enough, and mean enough, all this will be there someday.
I think one of the skills of Kevin Costner as a filmmaker, especially in regard to his westerns, is that he really knows how to use the landscape. I think in a similar fashion that very much reflects upon the sort of style of filmmaking of earlier directors like John Ford. In these sprawling period pieces, the land helps to tell a story. And whether we see these very vibrant hillsides or some of the plateaus and mesas in other scenes, it really helps to convey a sense of both time and place.
There's no army of this earth that's going to stop those wagons coming.
And it looks like we have the cavalry being introduced here. And if this does in fact take place in the years of the American Civil War, just at first glance here, I must say that the uniforms look like they're a little bit off. This seems something that's very much post-war, or in fact something that we may have seen in Hollywood westerns of the 1950s or the 1960s. But I know some other uniforms throughout that looked a little bit better, so we'll wait and see. Costner, of course, exhibited, I think, a great degree of empathy in regard to the storyline of Native American characters, as was seen in Dances with Wolves. That was very forward-thinking, especially for the early 1990s. I'll be very fascinated to see how this dynamic, this sort of duality, plays out in Horizon. And in a recent interview, Kevin Costner, I think, really gets to the heart of the matter. And one, he recognizes some of the inherent wrongdoings and evils that occurred in the conquering of the American West. And he said, though, at the same time, does that necessarily make my ancestors bad people? Perhaps they can still be heroic as well, because it did take a lot of grit and fortitude to make that big leap into the American West. And so I sense, and I'm hopeful, that we'll kind of get those dual perspectives of both injustice and innovation, perhaps, as America is greatly evolving in this era of the Civil War.
Quick, come on!
It's all right. I'm gonna be with Dad.
No.
In this scene, I am reminded of one of the opening clashes in John Ford's The Searchers, where a number of the women and children try to take shelter. Some of them escape. Many of the men in that scene die. Perhaps it is a trope of the Western to an extent, but then again, these things did happen. And I think one of the important things for filmmakers like Costner to reminisce upon is the fact that this was very much a seesaw of violence that swayed back and forth, and one time one act of violence was met by another. And I do get the sense that we're going to perhaps be seeing some of that in this film.
All I'm trying to do is get as many of us as I can, as far as I can.
So here we see some civilians as well as a cavalry corporal here at a graveside service. Some of this garb here looks a little bit more passable. The guy in the blue shirt particularly looks the part. The cavalryman, he's looking okay. That sort of dark blue hat is more representative of the style that you would see during the American Civil War. And indeed, there were many cavalrymen, thousands of them, in the American West at this time, 8,000 in New Mexico alone, I believe. So not all of the armies are in Virginia or Tennessee, because there's very much the need of garrisoning these forts and outposts, because the question remains, well, what will become of this nation after the Civil War? Many people will be moving west.
I'd just like to have a drink tonight with someone who knows how to act.
Here we get a glimpse of some additional Native American characters, and frankly, I'm not even sure where this movie is set. Not enough information has yet been released about it. I believe it was filmed in Utah, but it could be taking place in Arizona or Texas or New Mexico or wherever in the Southwest. And perhaps one way to think of this, for whatever reason, I'm thinking of like the movie Crash, where it has all of these overlapping storylines that connect with one another. We see all of these actors exchange courtesies or acts of violence almost in passing, and I wonder if this is going to play out in a similar formula.
It's like to have a drink tonight with someone who knows how to act.
I really don't think this is how women of the 1860s looked. I'd say the clothing is a bit off, the hair is really off. And modern makeup, probably not so much. So, yeah, I'm probably not the best representation of authentic material culture here. But after all, it's a Western.
You're not taking the full measure of this, Mary.
I think this little nod to location here may be revealing. I can't think of a place that's named Horizon, so perhaps the community that is being shown here, obviously in the namesake of the movie, probably fictionalized, but it's a nice little touch that we see here, because perhaps this is a poster or a broadside that ties in with the ongoing issues of the Homestead Act, which is brought into being in the year 1862, and the very same day that the Emancipation Proclamation is released is the day that the first land claim is issued to a veteran of the U.S. Army, no less. So I wonder in these so-called land rushes if any of these will be depicted in the film, and if that has major bearing in the plot. Well, quite the epic this may be, in two parts, no less. I guess the big question here, will Part 1 garner enough attention for people to go see Part 2 only 2 months later? But certainly it's probably more cost efficient to film the movies back to back than risk not making the second one at all. I'm really interested in seeing more footage associated with this movie. In its totality, between the two films, this could perhaps be a 5-hour joint movie. So I need to see a little bit more footage before I render full judgment. In the meantime, what you can do in the months until Horizon comes out, if you are interested in learning more about the real history of this time period and this geographic region and the role that it played in the American Civil War era, the book that you really have to check out is called The Three-Cornered War. And the subtitle for that is The Union, the Confederacy, and Native Peoples in the Fight for the West. The American West is an overlooked and neglected theater of operation, but its actions, its various people and events were absolutely foundational to what happened in the years that followed. This book is by historian Megan Kate Nelson, and I think a very fitting excerpt to share with you that ties in nicely with the trailer that we just watched says this. As the war was beginning in Virginia, the struggle over lands west of the Mississippi was also getting underway. In the Union War Department, a few steps from the White House, clerks wrote out dispatches to commanders in California, Oregon, and Western Territories. The federal government needed Army regulars currently garrisoned at frontier forts to fight in the Eastern Theater. These soldiers should be sent immediately to the camps around Washington, D.C. In New Mexico Territory, however, some regulars would have to remain at their posts. The political loyalties of the local population, large numbers of Hispano laborers, farmers, ranchers, and merchants, a small number of Anglo businessmen and territorial officials, and thousands of Apache and Navajos were far from certain. So I think one of the things that determines or can determine a historically accurate Western is that does it really capture the full vitality and vibrancy and diversity of the American West? And additionally, will we see people of Confederate sympathy or even Confederate combatants in either of these two films? I think that would create a very rich mosaic if we could bring all of these conversations and perspectives together to see how the American Civil War is affecting people who are trying to live, reside, and fight in this territory. So that is what I hope Horizon might accomplish. Thanks for tuning in to this trailer breakdown here on Real History. Once more, if you haven't done so already, we invite you to hit that subscribe button below. We appreciate any form of support, but most especially your views and your subscriptions. Thank you very much. Until we see you next time on Real History, stay curious.